Let me get this going. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I want to say thank you for joining this Zoom presentation today. I am Elisa Wiest. I'm the program manager at the Verona Senior Center. And as always, I just love seeing people come on and joining us in this virtual world. I know it's been over a year of this kind of being the type of programming that we're having. And I'm so proud for all of you that have attempted to even try it. And it's just been a wonderful experience on our end. And I am just so blessed to have speakers like Neal join us today. Neal Nybo, he's worked with us in the past. I'm really excited because he's going to be talking to us a book that he helped write that launches tomorrow. So that's super exciting that we get to be one of the first people to hear about this book. And I just want to introduce him. So Neal has had lots of experience working with family and friends with negativity. We live in a time where we can get down really easily, right? There's a lot going on in our lives, a lot of different things coming at us all at once. And we can just feel overwhelmed with negativity at times. So Neal is a positivity expert. And he will, today's presentation, he's going to apply his research and experience and knowledge of improving positivity in companies and organizations and in our daily lives. His new book, which is called Workplace Positivity, it's going to describe 30 micro actions to help eliminate negativity in the workplace, as well as at home and in our communities. And I know Neal's not going to have a chance to talk about all 30 of those micro actions today. So all the more reason to get his book and read that for yourselves. But on that note, I want to turn it over to Neal and just say thank you for coming today.
Well, thank you, Elisa. I'm delighted to be here again. I was here a year ago, almost, and had a great time, and we had a great interaction and involvement, and I'm excited to do that again. And in fact, I kind of prepared myself for that by getting closer to home for you folks. So I found where Verona is, and I showed this to Elisa, and she said that luckily for you, you don't have that much snow anymore, but that was probably the way it was not very long ago. Of course, it doesn't look like that where I am. I'm in San Diego, and by law, we don't allow snow within the city limits, and so that's lucky for us. But I guess it's to your advantage to have seasons. We don't really have seasons in San Diego. And Elisa was right. Nicole Phillips and I are releasing our new book tomorrow. It's called Workplace Positivity, and this is the book, and we're excited about it. Nicole and I work with companies and organizations in dealing with negativity, and as Elisa said, there's so much of it going on, both in the virtual world of the office as well as in regular offices. And I can imagine many of you have experienced different kinds of negativity in the last year. So we have put together 30 micro actions to eliminate negativity. And we say wherever you work, but really these are also great for in your own lives, in our relationships with people. And a micro action is just the smallest little thing that we can do that over time make a big difference. And so I'm going to move us into a new place. I think some of you will recognize this spot. So this is your beautiful library, and it's gorgeous. It looks huge, and so you do a lot of learning there. And so I want to ask you, what are some things that you have experienced recently that would be an area that is negative that you would like to know? How could you better approach it? What could you do differently so that you could respond in a more positive way, a more positive experience? And while you think about that, because I'm sure you could come up with a lot of them, maybe in family situations, friends situations. Boy, if we got into politics, we would be hearing all about it. But I want to hear from Alisa and Sarah. So Sarah is a friend of mine. She's on the web. She's on the call now. And Sarah said they went on a trip, spring break, to South Dakota to see Mount Rushmore, and they didn't get to see it. And it was a pretty negative experience with all the kids in the car and all of that. So Sarah, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you for letting me join your virtual Zoom, the Verona Senior Center. As Neal was saying, Alisa and I have 5 kids between the two of us, and we thought it sounded fun. Ooh, sorry. Sorry, I forgot to mute my phone. We thought it'd be fun to bring the kids on a road trip to South Dakota. We didn't really care where, just fun road trip. And as we learned about the different places we could visit, Mount Rushmore became the #1 thing that everyone recommended going to. So here, Alisa and I are in the car. We drove 6 hours to Sioux Falls and then 6 hours to Lead, South Dakota. We decided on Monday we would try to go visit Mount Rushmore. We had it mapped out. We're driving there, and we get to what I thought was the bottom of the mountain, and a police officer is there directing traffic to turn around and leave. So here we had hyped the kids up about seeing the faces in the rocks, and this police officer says, "I'm sorry, but there's fires going on, and it's not safe to let you go any further." And we had seen the smoke, but it was kind of a crushing moment to know here we had driven all this way with these kids, and we might not get to see it. So we checked each day to see if the fires had changed, and for 2 more days in a row, Mount Rushmore was still closed. So the timing of our trip was not that good if our hopes were to see Mount Rushmore. We didn't end up going to see it. But I have to say, Alisa on this Zoom is seriously the best, easiest road traveler, because she made the entire trip super fun. We thought gas station food was just heavenly because we didn't have to cook. Okay, and I guess I have to go. My kids are telling me a car's flipped over, so I'll be back.
No.
Oh,
Alisa, take over. I don't know. I gotta go
Okay.
check this fire drill.
yeah. No, that's a big deal. So I felt that it's a shift of perspective, right? So we had this goal in mind and we couldn't do that goal. And here's these 5 other kids in the car, very impressionable little children, right? And I could have turned that into like, oh, woe is me, or, oh, and made it this negative thing. Instead, I just put a spin on it, and I started talking about all the other places we could go, and started focusing on our cabin, and that we got to be in a hot tub, and that we got to have ice cream for breakfast every day if we wanted to. So I took what could have been a negative experience and just put a spin on it. And I think that's one of the best ways to get through times in life. There's always a positive. If you look through the silver lining, is kind of my perspective. And the kids never once really brought it up after that. And I think it was just because I put a spin on the perspective. So, yeah.
That's awesome. We should have 31 micro actions, and the 31st one is put a spin on it. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Hey, so that actually leads into my first one. But before I get there, has anybody else got just, without necessarily going into a lot of detail, but what are some of the things that bring us some situations where we might experience some negativity, either within ourselves or in interactions? Like, for instance, and maybe you just want to raise your hand, either going to a store and all the things around masks, and whether or not people are masked or aren't masked, and if you're required to wear a mask or you're not required to wear a mask, and what do you think about people who wear or don't wear masks? That's an area, right, that we have it. And then what about with kids or with grandkids, our own children or our grandchildren, and they have different opinions than we do, don't they? Shocking, isn't it? Wow, I bet you've learned, like I have, to kind of lead in with a conversation with how's the weather, and don't even argue about that. You know, it's just like we, right, with our own kids. So sometimes we have differing opinions with them as well. Anybody else? What other situations do you find yourself where negativity can be present in situations that you're aware of?
Well, my mother is 91 years old, and right now she's in a skilled nursing home, and it's a beautiful facility, and you know, the employees there are always so kind when we're there. But my mom is so negative about it, and that's one reason why I wanted to watch your Zoom, because I want to see how best I can try to change her, at least when we're you know, face to face, change her perspective a little.
Right. And Chuck, thank you for sharing that. And are you able to visit her physically, or do you have to do it over Zoom, or?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
You know, I've got some ideas for you. That's a great example. Anybody else? It's all right. We'll go from there. We'll start with that. I'm going to give you 3 things that you can hold on to, and several micro actions for each of them. And the first one is laying the groundwork. So Chuck's example is a great one because he can anticipate this. And so you lay the groundwork, and in fact, it's just exactly what you're saying, Chuck. How could I think about things? What could I plan so that when I'm with her, I could help her be less negative? Now, Alisa and Sarah, they ran into a big challenge with the police officer. They had no time to plan. And yet they still could lay the groundwork for positivity. And Alisa talked a little bit about that. And in any of our conversations or interactions, when we know we're going out and we're going to see things that we might not agree with, or talk with people that we might not agree with, what can we do? And the first thing we can do is lay the groundwork. And so let me bring up my the first micro action that I want to tell you about. Now, I don't think you can see this, so don't worry. I won't. There's no test. But I wanted you to see that in our workbook, we have 30 micro actions, and each one of them has a worksheet that goes with it. And so this is the first worksheet. It's called Think About What You're Thinking About. That's a little micro action that we can do. Think about what you're thinking about. And my writing partner, Nicole here, I've got to read it even on a bigger screen off to my side. Decide right now that you will contribute to a more positive place by stopping the negativity train before it comes up in your head or out of your mouth. Decide that you will contribute to a more positive place by stopping the negativity train before it comes out, before it comes up in your head or out of your mouth. So the idea here is that we can think about what we're thinking about. I don't know if you've ever daydreamed, but I used to have a long commute, and I would be about 25 minutes from home, and I would realize I had been daydreaming about an interaction I was going to have at work, or about one I'd had at work. And I'd been thinking about that for about 20 minutes, playing in my mind. Well, I'm going to say this, and then they said that, and then this, and oh my gosh, if this happens. And the thing is that those thoughts were going through my mind, and I wasn't even aware of it. I was just engaged in that personal interactive conversation. And so Nicole, in our book, one of the very first micro actions is to think about what you're thinking about. And for me, in that situation, what I could do is to think about the people that I was thinking about, the situation, the conversations, the interactions, and realize what they were making me feel. And I was feeling frustrated or discouraged, angry, and I could hear myself saying these, whatever these things were. And of course, in the privacy of my own car and in my own mind, I could be pretty negative. But you know, I wouldn't necessarily be that in the moment, but it certainly flavored, colored my interactions when I had all of this negativity going on in my head and I wasn't really very aware of it. So in our workbook, I'll just read you we said, when was the last time you faced negativity? So in the workbook, we take a minute and have you just write down, when was the last time you faced negativity and what did you do? So that's an interesting thought. What did you do? And then the next question is, what could you do differently? So you know, what this is doing is helping us to become very intentional about responding to negativity. And we've had to do that here in San Diego with vaccinations and who's getting vaccinated and who's not, who has gotten vaccinated, how many weeks are they away, are we allowed to meet in our backyard now or not? And some people, you know, everybody has a different opinion. And what we've had to understand, my wife and I, is we've had to think about what we're thinking about each of the people, either in our family or our friends, and say, you know, this is what I'm thinking about that person, and this is the way I think I would respond. And could I have a better response? And that has been very, very helpful, because had I not thought about what I was thinking about, I'd have responded just off the cuff. And I can tell you, I'm sorry to say, I could be a little frustrated or a little upset, a little angry. And I was very glad to have practiced this micro action, so that when I did text a friend about being able to see each other and that sort of thing, I was able to say it in a very kind way, in a way that was supportive of them and encouraging of them. And I was so grateful that I'd done that, because when they replied to me, it wasn't a nasty, angry reply. They received it as a positive way of, you know, thanks so much for mentioning that. I'll take a look at that. Right now, this is what's going on for me. And I went, yay, that instant feedback. I actually had taken that negative and made it a positive. So that's the first one, is think about what you're thinking about. And then the second one is one of my favorites, and I'll explain it to you in a minute. But I'll just bring it up and show it to you, is find an accountability partner. Find an accountability partner. So Nicole says, finding someone to partner with can ensure your success as you create your own positive perspective. And I've added a comment at the bottom, whether your crisis comes in person or on the phone or digitally, or having an accountability partner can make or break your next decision, and even your career. Now, you're not worrying so much about careers right now, I'm guessing, but it can make or break a conversation, a relationship. And the example that I gave in the book is something that you probably haven't got this on the tip of your tongue, but here, look at it. By the way, I'm reading my own book, so shameless plug there. But does anybody remember the name Thomas Maudley? You know what? Probably not. And that's unfortunate for poor Thomas Maudley. Thomas was the acting Secretary of the Navy in 2020, just last year, the acting Secretary of the Navy. And he fired an aircraft carrier's captain. So this may be stirring up some memories for you. He fired an aircraft carrier's captain, and then he flew from wherever he was to wherever the aircraft carrier was in the world and spoke to the crew whose captain he had just fired. And I got to believe he was doing what I was doing in the car. He was mulling it over and thinking about, not thinking about what he was thinking about. He was just having all of these thoughts, and they were all pretty negative. So when he got there, he gave this speech and just really hammered this captain that he had fired. And that's not what you do in the Navy. And within the next day or so, he was fired, because that's not what you do. And I thought, my goodness, if Thomas Modley had just had an accountability partner that he could have said, hey, I'm going to do this speech tomorrow and I'm pretty angry about this. Could I read you my speech? Could I tell you some of my thoughts? And that accountability partner would have said, well, good for you to get it off your chest and to say it, right now. Now, throw that away, delete that speech, and we're going to write something new that won't get you fired. So Thomas Modley could literally be a name we would recognize today if he'd had an accountability partner. And so I just encourage each of you to find somebody. I bet you know someone, and you could, and I would make it intentional. Of course, we bounce things off of other people a lot, but I want to give you just one tip for when you are finding an accountability partner. You want to ask them specifically to be an accountability partner who's going to help you think about what you're thinking about. That's going to help you with your deal with some areas of negativity. And you thought of them because, and you write down, and in our workbook, we give you an opportunity to write down, here's why I chose you. And it might be because of your honesty, because I know you care about me, because I know you'll shoot straight with me, but I also respect your opinion. And the reason I say to ask them and to be intentional and direct about it is that, friends don't often like to give negative feedback. I mean, friends are friends, and we're usually, as a friend, we usually support our friends to the end, right? This is why we like to talk to friends, because we say to them, you won't believe what happened. This is what happened at the store. And what does a friend say? I can't believe it. That's the worst thing that ever happened, right? So if you just go to a friend and ask them their opinion, Thomas Modley, he'd have gone to a friend and they'd said, yeah, that's right. That aircraft, he was horrible. He deserves this. That's not what you're looking for in an accountability partner. You're actually asking someone to listen, to talk to you and engage you, and to say, okay, you asked me to give you this feedback. Let me give you some feedback. And so that might be good in any of the situations we've been talking about. So those are both part of laying the groundwork. And the second area is to get an exit plan. So this is the second portion of our book. And Nicole gives 4 different ways to develop an exit plan. And I think you probably already know what I'm talking about. You're on the phone with somebody. You're engaged in a conversation and you know it's turning south. What's your strategy to get out of it? Without a good strategy, without an exit plan, oftentimes, we see this all the time, it's shocking. Somebody shouts something very negative and then walks away or hangs up. Yikes. That behavior is perfectly designed to get us exactly the opposite of what we really want. With our kids, with our parents, with our coworkers. So So the idea is to find an exit strategy. And here is another one of my favorite micro actions. As you're trying to develop an exit strategy, the first micro action is, and Chuck, I'm looking at you, I'm thinking of you. It's this: give grace. Give grace. The reason I love this one is that dear friends of mine, Ken and Margie Blanchard. Ken is a mentor of mine. You might recognize the name. He's the author of The 1 Minute Manager, you know, which he wrote like 150 years ago. So, but you know, it was very popular. He's still alive, and he's doing a great job, and he's very positive, and he's had a great influence on my life. But Margie had this definition of grace. Because many of us who go to church, you know, we hear about grace. I know there's a lot of Lutherans up where you are, and grace is a big part of the Lutheran church. But Margie's definition of grace is to assume others are doing the best they can given their current level of understanding. Now, that's worth writing down. Assume others are doing the best they can given their current level of understanding. The reason I love that definition is that it stimulates kindness in us. Assume others are doing the best they can. But it also lets us be realistic. Sometimes we know they're not doing the best they can, right? Sometimes we know our kids didn't show up on time, or didn't, you know, or the person at the grocery store or the restaurant, or you know, wherever, they didn't do the very best job. Being kind does not mean, you know, turning a blind eye to everything, and being positive doesn't mean you have to be in denial about things. No, you can recognize, you know, they could have done a better job. But grace is assuming they did the best job they could given their current level of understanding. Maybe this person just simply didn't know how to do a better job. Maybe this person had a bad day. Maybe that some of us, maybe we're contributing to some of this. And so their reaction or their actions occur partly because of how we've responded to them. And so give grace. And I'm taking a look at my notes because Nicole is so good at this. And she said, you know, when you send an email to somebody and you get kind of a negative reaction or something not exactly what you were expecting, for me, I can feel like, well, they weren't listening, or they don't care, or they disagree, or any of these things that come up immediately, because oftentimes negative thoughts come up more easily than positive ones. Instead of responding to what she thought the person was writing, she assumed they were doing the best they could given their current level of understanding. She offered them grace, and she simply wrote back and said, you know, that their email doesn't always communicate the emotions we're feeling, but I got a sense of frustration or something from you. Can you say more about that? And the person immediately responded and said, oh, thank you so much for responding. I don't mean any of that. The last 24 hours have been terrible for me, and I've had a number of situations, and it must have come out in the way I responded to you. So so she was able to head that off in a way that that made a really different, a very positive experience out of one that could have been negative. And Chuck, I was thinking of your mom. What an opportunity to help her to say, you know, Mom, what would it mean to assume they're doing the best they can given their current level of understanding? My mom was in a retirement home, and she had to do that with the people she lived with. you know, because it was funny. People ended up she lived in Southern California, up in the LA area. People wound up there from New York. Well, you know, old Brooklyn people are very different than old LA people. And the Brooklyn folks, sometimes at dinner, they would respond in really what my mom thought was a critical way to a slow server or something. And she had learned to, in that case, assume they're doing the best they can given they come from Brooklyn, right? So, and I don't actually mean that as a put down to people from Brooklyn, but people from Brooklyn actually just respond in a different way. They don't mean what we in LA hear it sounding like. So we offer grace, so we said laying the groundwork. Which included think about what you're thinking about and find an accountability partner. And then we said create an exit plan. And I only gave you one. As I told you, Nicole has 4 different micro actions. One of them is give grace. And she has 3 more. And the third one I would tell you, the third thing I would say is connect with heart. Connect with heart. And you know, what I tell people when I'm speaking to supervisors and managers, I say, I don't expect you to take all 30 of these and try to implement them. None of us can do that. I don't do that, but I have some that I do on a regular basis. And one of them is this next one. It's called start with personal. Start with personal. And I'll show you just the, well, that's the give grace. And then start with personal. In every interaction, by starting with personal, we demonstrate that we genuinely care about others. We genuinely care about others. And today with texts and emails, it's so easy to do this, and yet it is almost never done. You can raise yourself above the level of 90% of the people who are interacting, texting, and emailing by doing this one thing, and that is start with personal. Instead of starting with whatever the topic is that you were going to talk about or write about, you start with something personal. So I always try to start with, hey, I hope that, I mean, Easter was yesterday. Hope you had a great Easter celebration. Hope that went well for you. Next time I write to Sarah, I'll probably say it was fun to hear your story about South Dakota. Sorry you didn't get to see Mount Rushmore. Anything like that. Just a simple start with personal. If I haven't seen the person for a long time, you know, I'll say, hey, I hope you're surviving this COVID thing. Hope you're doing okay. And that can happen in a conversation. It can happen in an email. It can happen in a text. I have a friend who said, you know what, I try to do that, but he actually was honest. He said, when I'm writing an email to a coworker, I am so engaged in whatever the topic is that I am going to do, I just start typing. I start writing and I say whatever I'm trying to say, which isn't necessarily negative, but engaging in the topic. He says, but then I go back to the top and I put in something personal at the beginning. So I love that, you know, even if you have to get it off your chest to begin with, start with something personal. Just to let them know that you recognize they're a human being. You care about them.
Neal, may I share your text from yesterday?
Okay, sure.
I have 2 examples of this. So I thought I'd share. Yesterday, 7:59 p.m., my husband and I are watching Netflix, and I get a text from Neal, who's in California, and it's 2 hours behind our central time here in Wisconsin. Happy Easter. It feels like new life is on the way. I'm glad we get to share it together.
Oh.
And this text out of the blue from you on Easter Sunday It's exactly what you're talking about. It felt personal. And even though we worked together on workbook and kindness, it was just a sweet, like it automatically brought a smile and good feelings.
Oh,
So,
thanks so much.
well, yeah, I just wanted to endorse what you're saying, that you do what you're saying to do.
Yeah. Well, good. Thank you. And I'm gonna wrap up pretty quickly here with my last micro action, and it is to respect their space. Respect their space. So I have to say this immediately after saying start with personal. And the reason is in my quote here, which you probably can't read, but I'll read it to you. It says, there's a fine line between being personal and too personal. It's easy to cross the line without noticing or intending. Let's get really good at recognizing that line and respecting their space. So when I say respect their space, I mean their personal space, what they're comfortable with. And again, this is perfect for family and friends. So respect their space. So I'll give you an example. My wife and I get up early. We have an adult daughter who's living with us. She's amazing. Speaking of Netflix, she reads scripts for Netflix to tell them if they should buy them or not. She's fabulous. But she gets up later than we do. And we're all chipper, right? We've had our coffee, we've had breakfast, we've brushed our teeth, we're talking. She comes down and we immediately engage her and start talking to her. All she wants to do is get a cup of coffee and go back upstairs. And she has asked us to do that, to say, you know what, could you not talk to me? And for us, it feels awkward. But I started looking at now my wife and I get up at slightly different times. She has to be at work at 7:30, so she's up before me. And then I'll get up. And so just about the time she's leaving, I'm getting up. So we don't interact so much. But when I've gotten up early with her, she doesn't want me to talk to her either. She's like, she's got her routine. And so I pointed that out to her. I said, look at what's going on right now. We're not talking. And that's all our daughter Annie is asking for, is some space, some personal space. So, you know, what happens in the office, I don't know if you can imagine this, but imagine somebody at the office, somebody's been sick and they get back into the office after a few days and they said, oh my gosh, hey, I hope you're doing better. What'd they do? They started with personal. Perfect. And they said, you know, gosh, you know, what did you have? Okay, that's probably an acceptable question. And the person can share, you know, I just had the flu, it was terrible. Or, you know, it was just a cold, but I didn't want to come in and give it to anybody. And now what if the person says, what medication were you on? Oh, there's the line. Where's the line? Right behind me. I just crossed it. That's too much. That's too much information. That's too personal. And so, you know, when we're talking to our family members, hey, what'd you guys do this weekend? Oh, we went out and we saw, you know, the so-and-sos. Oh, great. I mean, what did you do? How long were you with them? Were you outside masked? Okay, I think we've gone too far. You know, so respect their space. And I think that works in any of our relationships, certainly with family members, certainly with friends, certainly with friends and relatives. And I just want to finish with one, respect their space. And this happened today, this morning. I don't know that Elisa knows this. I have relatives who live in Verona. Scott and Ann Bogan, they live in Verona. They are not seniors, and so they would not be familiar with your place. But I texted Scott at about 5 minutes to 1 and said, "You're never going to guess where I'm speaking today." And I told him, and then I said, "And I'll send you the link just in case you want to pop in." But I did it 5 minutes before the presentation because I didn't want to pressure him into rescheduling his time, because he's like, "Well, I guess I should probably do this, Neal." If I had told him yesterday, then there would have been this, right? But by actually telling him in not too much, oh my gosh, Scott is on.
Hi.
Hey, so Scott, I was just telling the story of just inviting you on. So you live in Verona, right?
I do, yes.
Well,
I didn't realize I might be part of the presentation too. This is exciting.
You're famous. You're one of the celebrities in Verona. So and I was just trying to say that I wanted to not give you so much time that you would feel obligated, but enough time that you could do it if you wanted. And
Sure.
that's an example of respecting their space. So thank you, Scott. I'm really honored that you would take time out of your day to come on and be here. So, and tell your parents I did a good job, whether I did or not.
I will. I will.
Well, let me wrap up there and ask any questions from anybody. Does this stir any thoughts for you? Any comments where you go, this totally makes sense? Here's the one I'm going to do this week, or I'm going to think about, or any questions that you have?
I have a work-related question, Neal.
Okay.
Who would be the top 3 companies that you see this workplace positivity workbook for? Like what types of businesses?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for that. I think it's to start with the mom and pop companies that have 5 or 6 supervisors that maybe work with 20 different people, and they want their supervisors to have a positive place, but they can't afford the big, HR surveys and all of that. I was thinking about who's our competition. Well, it's funny. It's these companies that are doing these huge programs. I mean, literally tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars to implement employee engagement and deal with toxicity and whatever these things are. But what you find is there's a high percentage of managers and supervisors in those companies that don't have the time or energy to implement the very strategies they help design. And I'm not suggesting that I have the big answers to solve the big problems. But what I do know from years of experience is that by practicing micro actions of kindness, you can really oil the system. You can put oil into the cogs of your organization, and conversations that might have gone south don't. And there's trust that's built, and there's relationships developed, so that when somebody gets an email that feels a little awkward, their first reaction isn't to go negative, but to say, hey, this seemed awkward to me. Can you say more about that? So mom and pops with a handful of supervisors who can begin to practice this with smaller, and then other organizations going up bigger than that with teams. So teams that have maybe many teams that have multiple staff under them, but you can help the team leaders to do this. So I would say it's not so much the size of the company or the kind of the organization, as much as this is directed at managers and supervisors and how they can help. They can be more positive towards their own employees, and they can then teach that to them to work with customers and that sort of thing.
Neal, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the thing you said about grace. So offering others grace. I also think that really ties into ourselves. So we need to offer ourselves grace, because I feel like when I'm offering myself grace, it's easier for me to offer it to others. And I think that's a big piece with everything going on as well. So would you say that is a big part of that grace piece?
Yes, thank you for that. That's a great point, is that if we can offer ourselves grace, then we can offer others grace more easily. But again, I guess maybe one of the underlying factors I want to say for all of this is intentionality matters. I don't know if you know some of these funny statistics, but if you ask 100 people if they are below average, average, or above average, like 75% of them will say they're above average, which you can't have that, right? So we all offer ourselves so much, we assume the best about ourselves and assume the worst about others. And so what I would love to see us do is to offer ourselves grace consciously, so that we can recognize, you know what, I'm going to assume I'm doing the best I can given my current level of understanding. I don't actually understand what these other people are thinking. I don't understand how they can believe what they believe, or how they can do or not do what they're doing. And I can feel really bad about that, or I can feel judgmental about that. But what I want to do is offer myself grace and just assume I'm doing the best I can given my current level of understanding. And you know what that's going to help encourage me to do? To try to understand a little bit more, to try to find out a little bit more from them. So yes, absolutely. Offer ourselves grace as well. Well, thank you all. And I'll just put in one more shameless plug for my book, because if you don't work, maybe you know somebody who does. Workplace Positivity, it releases tomorrow. It's already on Amazon, but love for you to take a look at that. And if you, I think, Alisa, I think we're going to do this again next week, if we can put a plug in for this meeting. So
yeah, so next week, April 12th, the same time, 1 p.m. Becoming Irresistible will be
that's right,
the topic.
So this week we said, let's lay the groundwork. Now next week, become irresistible. And I've got a few micro actions that you can do that people are going to want you around. So we'll make you irresistible next week. Well, thank you, Alisa, so much.
Yeah,
and,
thank you, Neal, and thank you to everybody. Yeah, thank you to everybody for coming today. Spread the word. Invite a friend to come next week. Everybody have a good rest of your Monday.